The best description of writing a novel that I ever heard is actually in Thomas Williams's book, The Hair of Harold Rue, which is about a novelist trying to write a novel, and it just covers like 1 or 2 days in this process, and a lot of things happen to him. It's a fabulous book. But he says that writing a novel is like building a little campfire on an empty, dark plain, and one by one, these characters come out of the dark, and each one has a little pile of wood, and they put it on the fire, and if you're very lucky, before the fire goes out, it's this big bonfire, and all the characters stand around it and warm themselves. And that's the way it's always been for me.
Hey everyone, what's going on? I hope you're having a great day. Let's dive on into my next book review. This is a nonfiction book. Stephen King has written a small number of nonfiction books, but this one we are diving on in because, again, I'm reading in chronological order, and that is Danse Macabre. For those who have not read Danse Macabre, I recommend it, especially if you are a Stephen King fan. Nonfiction book, again, is not really his forte, but this book is really interesting. I think this was written around like 1980 or just at least the early 80s. So this book is full of information and text that Stephen King referenced and looked up and made sure everything was right and correct in order, talking about the different aspects of horror in literature, movies, and radio. Let's dive on into Danse Macabre. Now, when we talk about Danse Macabre, like I mentioned, this is nonfiction. Now, when it comes to nonfiction, I'm not against it at all by any means. The creativity and free range in fiction is what I love the best about reading those books and writing fiction for myself as well. But when nonfiction comes, we talk about Stephen King's interest in horror. In Danse Macabre, it talks about Stephen King's love for horror. It talks about the introduction and how he became so interested in the horror genre. I just love what he talked about in this. So there are 10 chapters in this book. Now, what I was going to do is I was going to actually go dive on in each chapter. I don't want to spoil anything for those who have not read Danse Macabre. This is a very informative book, and again, I do recommend you go and check it out if you are a huge Stephen King fan, just like I am. There's a foreword in the beginning, and then obviously there's an afterword after all the chapters, and then there's also 2 appendix. There's one appendix for just the books itself, and then there's appendix for the movies, and then there's an index at the end. A lot of information put into this book, and again, this is from the 80s. If Stephen King were to write another Danse Macabre book, maybe Danse Macabre 2, which would be kind of funny, but if you were to write another one, I guarantee you a lot of things may have changed. He references his favorite films and literature through the 1950s to the 1980s, obviously up to this book. So 30 years of horror, and there's also the aspects of sci-fi and a little bit of fantasy in this book as well. And Stephen King likes to dive on into, referencing different types of genres and his main genre that he always focuses on. Another thing I love about Danse Macabre is it actually goes back and he talks about referencing his work with other works and kind of comparing and contrasting them as well, which is really cool to do because obviously at this time in the 80s, he hasn't been really a big writer yet. He's written obviously the big books, Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, and I think actually he was working on Night Shift as well with this, or he might have just finished Night Shift, I can't remember. He's written those books up to that point of writing his nonfiction Danse Macabre, so he has the reference and he has the reputation as an author and a horror author. So when he talks about the films, he talks about all these old 50s, and he even goes back to kind of like the 40s and stuff when he was a child, talking about the different movies, the different black and white movies that were out there, one known as The Body Snatchers. That's just one that popped off the top of my head. The literature aspect, I really loved what he talked about. He talks about books such as Frankenstein, Dracula, The Haunting of Hill House, and also different types of vampire books as well. Again, with all of this being said, I do give this only 4 stars. There's a little rambling on with certain instances, such as, I don't know, referencing different types of radio comments and also the difference of films and radio as a whole. That's all with it being a 4-star. But again, Danse Macabre is a great book. Nonfiction, again, is not really my go-to. As you can tell on my channel, I don't have a lot of nonfiction content, but I'm always open to recommendations if you want to comment in the comments below of any really good horror nonfiction books that are out there, like the history of horror or something like that. I definitely would read that in a heartbeat. Again, I can't say too much of this book because you have to go out there and check it out for yourself. It is an amazing feeling to see and kind of dive on into the brain of Stephen King, and he obviously doesn't give all of his secrets away in here or gives away like the juiciest details, but in Danse Macabre he does dive on into why he became a horror writer in a way and like how horror made him as a whole, and it's just really interesting to see. And in the beginning of the book, as I'm looking at it right now, he gave this kind of like a dedication to 6 great novelists who were alive at the time in 1981. As I can see the copyright on the opposite page. But here are some of the authors he gave notice to: Robert Bloch, Jorge Luis Borges, Ray Bradbury, which is one of my favorites, and he also dives on into one of my favorite books by Ray Bradbury, and he actually gives it a lot of credit because he was noticing that it wasn't one of his famous works, but in his opinion, it's one of his favorite books by Ray Bradbury, and that's why I loved reading that, because I could relate to Stephen King as he was talking about the book. But other than Ray Bradbury, Frank Belknap Long, Donald Wandre, and Manly Wade Wellman. Now, some of those authors I do not know. Bloch, obviously I know. Ray Bradbury I know. And some of those other ones are interesting ones he talks about, and it kind of like gives a little, not synopsis, but like gives a little details about certain authors and certain horror genres that kind of influenced them, and the way he sees horror as a whole. As Stephen King thinks about horror, as he writes at the time of this book, everything is coming together for what he's created up to this day, and it's amazing just to go back all the way to the 80s to read this nonfiction book that is chock full of great information, movies and books, and certain radio facts and information that he actually mentions, because back then radio was a huge thing. TV was also as well, but not as big as it is today. Radio, obviously people in the cars that will still listen to some radios and stuff like that, but it's not as popular as it was back in the 80s. But again, Danse Macabre is a great read, and I just loved everything about it. Even though I gave this 4 stars, it's still one hell of a book. And again, for nonfiction, for those who do love nonfiction out there, comment in the comments below, because this one you definitely want to check out. I highly recommend it, like I said from the beginning, like a broken record. I'm so glad to have reread it the second time, because as I go through this journey again through Stephen King and all of his work, it's interesting to kind of see things I either didn't pick up or things that weren't really abundantly clear to me as I read it the first time. So reading Danse Macabre a second time gave me a big outlook on horror, and more than it was in the first time. Everyone, that is it. Thank you for stopping by, and don't worry, I have a music reaction video coming up soon. I have it off the top of my head. It's kind of an interesting one per se, but you'll have to wait and find out when I upload it, of course. Thank you for stopping by. Like I always say, my friends, comment, spread the word of my channel. We are over 1,000 subscribers, like I mentioned in my previous video. Let's keep adding on to that. My subscribers and friends, I thank you so much. I will be making 1,000 subscriber videos soon, and hopefully there will be some kind of rewards, like an Amazon gift card giveaway like I did in previous videos, to show my appreciation to all my subscribers and supporters. So again, stay tuned for that as well. And like I always say, my friends, please read your book cover to cover. We'll see y'all later.